Hello, and welcome to Pique My Interest, a podcast dedicated to creativity. My name is Scoob Decker, and I am an artist and your host. PMI is an exploration in meeting some incredible artists, learning about their craft, and exploring what makes them create. I am so excited to introduce Sparky. Sara Baumann is a spunky Iranian-American artist full of heart who dabbles in many multimedia art forms, but specializes with painting portraiture and patterns with both paint on canvas as well as several programs on her tablet. Her unique insight towards creation allows her to open her creativity, making each project stand out from a piece from massive floral work to powerful portraits to vibrant shoes. She is a passionate artist who uses her work to speak to you with powerful messages that she finds important and insightful, such as women fighting for their rights in Iran, as well as just sharing the beautiful culture of Iran. This drives her series like Women and Weapons, which highlights the kick-ass intrinsic power of women, as well as the Heritage series. With pressure from her parents, she got her master's in occupational therapy, but after working in that field, she found her true calling as a fully based artist who has self-taught a great understanding of the business side of art. In her words, art is it. I'm gonna make it work. I'm determined. She combines her culture and heritage with the art surrounding herself to produce the world-class artwork by Sparky. This episode was recorded on June 28th in Dallas, Texas. I hope you look up their work and your interest is piqued. I hope you're having a grand day, and please enjoy this week's episode I've titled Women and Weapons. Hello, and welcome to Pique My Interest. I am currently in Dallas, Texas, sitting in this beautiful home of this unique artist. How are you doing today?
I am phenomenal. Today is the first full day in my house. I haven't been here since basically December when we had a massive flood here, so I am ecstatic, and you're here and you're full of joy, so that makes me happy.
First day back in the house and have a weird artist in your house. I get it.
Oh, I love it. I love having weird artists in the house.
Have you done anything interesting lately?
Move in. That was super interesting. I think probably one of the most fun things that I've done lately has been kind of putting some of my artwork onto more physical products and launching that on my website with some other physical products coming out later this year. So that's been a really big milestone that I've wanted to hit for a long time that I've officially got the ball rolling on. So
fantastic. Well, before we get to that, please introduce yourself. What is your name and where are you from?
So my name is Sara Baumann. A lot of people call me Sparky, and I'm originally from here, Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas, originally born and raised in actually more of the Denton area, which is about an hour outside of Dallas. But yeah, here.
And please, pique our interest. What is your craft?
My craft is predominantly painting. However, I do recognize myself as a multimedia artist. Pretty much any form factor of art I find intrigue in, and I generally have to get my hands on it. So I've done everything from painting to sculpture to photography. You name it, I've probably laid hands on it.
I found you with your digital art and your painting, and there's another one in there that I'll save till later. What is your specialty within your craft?
Yeah, I would say probably my specialty is portrait work and pattern work. So oftentimes my patterns are done more digitally, whereas I really enjoy doing portrait work with acrylics and or gouache paints. I have a gigantic portrait actually sitting behind you right now, and that's pretty much done entirely with acrylics and gold foil. But that's I would say the bulk of my niche.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just looking at this painting behind me, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful, it resembles a lot of your other artwork, just looking at it online and whatnot. It definitely evokes a story. I mean, every piece that I've seen just sends emotions right to you, and so I just want to say thank you for that. I'm super glad to pick your brain about all of it.
Yeah, I'm excited.
What makes this work different than other painters?
I think I put a lot of generally thought behind my artwork. Usually my artwork stems from something that has piqued a emotion in me, whether it be the way that I have seen women fight in Iran for their freedoms, which is something that's highly important to me, or whether it be the way that I've seen women perceived, particularly in the mid-century era, where they just were not, valued in their strengths the way that they really deserve to be, that has kind of launched a series of artworks that actually, I think, gained a lot of acclaim, my Women and Weapons collection. But usually a lot of my artworks come from something that has, I guess, almost triggered me and wanted me to explore different narratives around.
And you just talked a little bit about the Iranian women. You yourself are Iranian American.
Yes.
How does that influence your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think I like to bring a hair of my culture to most of my artworks. And whether that be an opportunity to kind of open the door for discussion about what is Iranian heritage like, what are the Iranian people like, or just sharing tidbits of my culture so that people can see the beauty that my culture has to offer in a way outside of just, for example, media coverage, right? Mm-hmm. That's something that's very important to me. And Iranian artwork and architecture and everything has been highly influential in my evolution of myself. I mean, I've been going back and forth to Iran since I was 8 months old and spend generally around a month to a month and a half there while I'm there. And so it's played a huge role in who I am and who I am as an artist, I think.
Yeah, I think you were giving a great representation for the women and the powerful message that they're trying to send. And
Thank you.
I'm really interested to learn more about women and weapons.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about your background. Do you have any education in painting?
So my parents actually enrolled me in what was called Art House at the time whenever I was a little kid. And I did that for a few years where I just learned a few different painting techniques. But the majority of my art learning has come predominantly through family. And then also just taking various different art classes while I was in high school, while those classes were free. But my whole family in Iran are pretty much entirely artists. My grandma on my dad's side, who's here in the United States, she was a painter as well. And then my dad is also a really wonderful artist. So I've kind of had art surrounding me from both sides of my family my entire life.
Mm-hmm. And then growing up in the Dallas area, has that influenced your artistic upbringing?
Absolutely. I mean, I've watched different artists in through Denton area, which is where I went to university, and it's a very kind of artistic city. It's kind of like a little Austin almost. And there's a lot of very artsy people that are in through that area. And so I think I've seen different ways that art can come to life through my growing up in the Denton area. But also, very much my Iranian heritage has made a huge impact on kind of how I've evolved as a person and as an artist, what's been influential to me.
Nice. And I think it's about time to drop a truth bomb here. Sparky's career really isn't art. You do something else too.
Yeah. Having a Middle Eastern mother means that you grow up with, you are going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, and you have that in your ear your entire life. And so I think I probably told my mom from the time that I was a kid that I want to be an artist. I want to be an artist. I want to be an artist. She's like, that's great, but you're going to school for something else. So I actually got my master's degree in occupational therapy, and I worked as an occupational therapist in both the outpatient and acute care settings for about 5 years, and then tapped out after COVID. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So no more of that?
I mean, I have my license active, but I really don't intend to ever go back to occupational therapy as a career.
So, art. We're
doing
it.
That's it. Art is it. Art is it. And I'm going to make it work, and I'm determined.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm actually in the middle of writing a musical right now where one of the main songs is self-determination.
Hey, you know what? There's a reason that they say that perseverance is one of the greatest skill sets to have, because, oftentimes people just give up too early, and that's when they kind of lose their footing and lose a lot of their opportunities. And I intend to continue to persevere and take risks and shoot my shot. So that's a goal.
So you've transitioned out of occupational therapy. You're full-time art now. Mm-hmm. You've been selling pieces. You've been telling me that some of these 5-figured paintings are going to some pretty big names. To me, that's pretty successful.
Thank you.
Do you consider yourself successful? What is success in your craft, and what got you succeeding in your craft?
I think that monetary value on your artwork for me is not what denotes success. I think being able to do what you love as a career and be able to take care of your family and feed yourself, that to me is success. And just knowing that people enjoy my artwork, they gravitate towards it, and I'm able to also make enough money to feed myself off of my craft, that to me is success. And then also, I think a lot of the relationships that I've made through my craft has been something that's been massively successful to me as well, because I've made probably some of my greatest lifelong friendships and relationships through artwork. And that is just something that I will eternally be grateful for.
So let's dive into it a little bit. Your digital work has a lot of women inspiration.
Yes.
Your painting has a lot of floral inspiration.
Yes.
Talk to us about it. What makes you decide on what to make?
Yeah.
Tell us about your creation process.
I think it really depends a lot of the time. Like I'm very big on women's independence and the strength in women. You know, I grew up with my mom as a figure in my life where I saw a lot of independence and strength and drive and everything that really, I think, shaped who I am as a woman. I've always very much looked up to women who are, you know, just kicking butt in life, and it's always been so inspirational to me. But I oftentimes paint, I think it's a reflection of how I'm feeling. So oftentimes whenever I paint my florals, it's usually because my brain needs a break from things that have like a lot of commentary around them and a lot of narrative around them. That's oftentimes where I seek just like a little bit of solace and a little bit of peace and a break. It's just kind of a flow state for me. Whereas, for example, this heritage collection that's behind you, or my women weapons collection, both of those collections were really meant to create a narrative, create a conversation around them about something going on in the world, whether it be at this point in time or a previous point in time. And those, I think, take a lot more brain energy from me because I want them to say something to people. And so very much, I think, what you see on the canvas at any given point in time is kind of a reflection of what's happening in my head and what's happening in my life at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And you use a lot of patterns in your work.
Yes.
Where do you find these patterns? Do you make them up yourself? And how are those influencing the message in your paintings or your digital work?
A lot of my patterns are a flow state. It's something that, like, I say, okay, I want to make this pattern. I get started with one general shape, and the next thing I know, it's blossomed into this very ornate pattern, which I think is something that has kind of grown onto me as a result of my trips to Iran and Turkey and seeing all the beautiful ornate patterns that are existing there, and just the time and the craftsmanship that it takes to create such a pattern, I think is kind of a note of love in the artwork. And I think for me, I'm obviously a bit of a maximalist, and that's where a lot of the drive to create these patterns and use them in my artwork comes from. But I also think it's a very strong reflection of, obviously, my heritage, but also femininity in my artwork as well.
Yeah, do you prefer using digital versus painting?
You know, it depends. I think for my patterns, I prefer digital because, you know, obviously there's a lot of different specs associated with digital artwork that make it much easier to produce a pattern and much quicker to produce a pattern.
Copy and paste.
Exactly, yeah. And then with my artwork, like with my portraits, with my florals, for example, I generally prefer painting. There's just nothing for me that can replace the feeling of a paintbrush on canvas or, you know, mixing your paints and getting that perfect color that you had in your head. That it truly can't be replaced for me.
And I think it's time to start talking about the third aspect that I'm interested in as well. You paint shoes.
Yeah, I do.
Can you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, so when I was in college, I obviously was seeking out a multitude of different ways that I could create income for myself, help pay for university, help pay for my lifestyle, and so on. And so I was buying and selling purses, I was creating jewelry, I was doing commissioned artwork for people, I got into painting sneakers and purses, and then that all stopped for a long period of time. I would say, almost a decade. And then I got a project working with a company called Polytrade where they wanted me to paint a bunch of sneakers for some of their team and some of the people that they were working with, and that kind of got me back into the realm of painting sneakers. And I was like, I really missed this. I enjoy this. And it really took off with a lot of people, which has been really awesome because it's been a fun little something that I do on the side whenever I'm in between paintings or when I need a break from painting or digital artwork or what have you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they're really, really neat. It's a bit of Sparky on
Yes.
your shoes, as well as the individuality of it. You have one here with the theme of a big company, and you can definitely see that theme, but it's also just floral as well.
Yes.
And I think it's really unique and really clever of you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
What gets your creative juices flowing?
Oh, gosh.
What inspires you?
I think oftentimes it's being out in the world. Most of the times that I've come up with an idea or I've been inspired, it's because I've been at a museum or, I've seen something happen in the world that just got, either my blood boiling or got me very passionate. Like, for example, my Women and Weapons collection actually was stemmed from seeing a art exhibition by an artist named Shirin Neshat, who's also an Iranian artist. And it had nothing to do with the mid-century, but it very much had to do with the perception of women in Iran. And I think that really got me kind of thinking about the perception of women in the mid-century era and kind of how that's evolved to now. And I started painting this collection to kind of reflect women in the mid-century era, making them powerful and utilizing a lot of these weapons as the symbolic and metaphoric weapons of the World War II era and the weapons that we as women carry innately within ourselves. But also, everything that happened in Iran in 2002 and 2009 and so on, where these women continuously fight for really all the people in Iran, but especially the women fight for their freedoms and are just consistently denied that opportunity, has made me extremely passionate. And I really want to share this narrative with the world and get people as passionate or close to as passionate as I am about what has happened to Iran since 1979.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's just really cool to see some of these series coming out and and the representation across all women. I mean, there's white cowgirls, there's people of color in there.
Yes.
So I think that's really cool. And you say your floral stuff, you say you're inspired by nature a little bit.
Yes.
A lot of your work, I'm looking at it, has a lot of like dripping on it.
Yes.
What's that inspired by?
I don't actually know. I've noticed two things I suppose I should say that I have that are kind of continuous with my floral artworks are the drips and then also generally circles. So like oftentimes there'll be like a circle in the background of my floral pieces. And I think the circle generally comes from, I think, my affinity for the sun. And then the drips are just kind of this like beautiful bleeding of nature into my world, into, my thoughts, my brain, and so on, and how I translate it onto canvas, I suppose. But I very much find myself gravitating towards, beautiful plant life that I feel like evokes an emotion out of an individual, whether it's like awe or, joy or whatever it may be, even shock sometimes. I find poisonous plants or cacti very intriguing because they're beautiful, but you can't touch them, or they're beautiful, but they're poisonous. And I find that to be a very intriguing juxtaposition.
Just like the Women and Weapons.
Just like Women and Weapons, yeah. Clearly juxtaposition is a very common theme throughout my artworks.
And I think, to me, the thing that stands out is the vibrancy. Everything's so bright.
Yes.
And it just shouts at you. And I just love looking at it and just diving into it a little bit.
Yes,
it's so fun to get into.
Definitely am a maximalist.
How much does your process change or adapt while you're working on it? Do you have messages that kind of come out while you're working on it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, oftentimes I've found that there's things that I'll start working on and I know that there's a message in there, but I haven't quite figured out how to pull that out of my brain into a verbal message. Mm-hmm. And usually it takes me working on the piece until I get to the end that I'm realizing this is what I'm working through mentally that I've put onto paper or onto canvas. Oftentimes it is me working through something mentally. It's just I'm a visual person and a lot of my thoughts come out visually as opposed to verbally. So it generally takes me a little bit longer to figure out how to convey that message verbally as opposed to just via artwork.
Well, sometimes it's hard to find the right words, and I can only imagine trying to find the right words and messages through painting. It's got to be difficult. But how long does it take for you to finish a piece and get that message to be sent out there?
It depends. I mean, some pieces I can finish them in a couple of days. Like oftentimes with my floral pieces, I'll finish them in a couple of days. But like, for example, with these heritage pieces, most of them take me like several months to finish painting because there's a lot of work and rework. And, I do this and I realize that it's not making the piece as powerful as I want the piece to be. And then I rework it and redo it or whatever it may be. So there's a lot of different aspects. It just really depends on what the piece is and what the message is trying to convey. But surely anywhere between days to multiple months.
Mm-hmm. And as well as the textures too. I mean, there's just so many different layers to this.
Yes.
That I'm sure as it's changing, you've got to go back and add or detract or...
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about the dots?
Yeah. I think I wanted to make my artworks kind of have a thumbprint of their own, I suppose. And so I started gravitating towards halftones in some of my digital works. And I was like, man, I really like this halftone aesthetic, which, we've seen in other artists as well. But I really like this halftone aesthetic and kind of this like comic pop art type vibe in association with my Iranian heritage, in association with artworks from the mid-century, and so on. I think it just kind of brings it into a current period. And so I started noticing that, I gravitate towards this pink skin tone with this halftone because it can represent anybody, I think. It doesn't have to represent just, anybody of a certain ethnicity. It can represent just about anyone. So that's, I think, part of the reason that I gravitated towards it. And it's just, it gives it visual intrigue, I think, and also has been a layer of difficulty for me that's given me a little bit more like, mental stimulation on how to problem solve through how to create this.
Yeah, it definitely is reminiscent of Bende art.
Mm-hmm.
But the combination between your style and that style and more of your style, it just turns into Sparky.
Yes.
And it's really cool.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now, while you're trying to create a Sparky piece, I'm sure at some points you can't figure out that meaning. You can't understand where it's going.
Yeah.
How do you overcome a creative block?
Oh man, oftentimes I think where I come over my creative blocks is whenever everything slows down. So at night when I'm laying in bed, when I'm driving and all the sound is off in the car, whenever I'm in the shower, that's when I think I start to really think deep and like dive deep into my brain. And that's whenever I start to pull out a lot of the whys behind the things that I do. And that's generally when I end up getting over my creative block. But, I found that the more cognitive clutter you have, the harder it is to overcome a creative block. I think sometimes as artists, we have a tendency to push ourselves to create, because especially nowadays, art is so focused on content, on social media content. And sometimes that can become overwhelming cognitively. And that's when it becomes like a big bottleneck. I feel like whenever you kind of wipe everything off of that slate and you take a moment to just get quiet, stand in the shower, let the water run over you, lay in bed with your head on the pillow and it's completely dark in the room, and you just kind of dive deep into the files of your brain, is when you're able to pull out a lot of your whys and reflect on a lot of the reasons that you've decided to do things.
And you've also said that your floral painting series is a little bit of a break. It's
Yes.
just kind of more of you not trying to put too much meaning into it and just trying to
Yes,
paint
just
over it.
meditate. Yeah.
And then in the end, you've got a whole new series of paintings.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I've heard people tell me, this doesn't look like you, blah 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 blah, yada yada, and that's fine. I don't care. I still use my same basically color palette, but I don't feel like artists should be pigeonholed into one particular aesthetic. I think that you should be able to navigate outside of your box and explore and show different sides of yourself through your artwork. And that's something that I definitely perpetuate, not only for myself, but for other artists as well.
I think that leads into my next question. How do you handle criticism?
I am not a good criticism handler. I am overly emotional and I'm a people pleaser.
So you're a human.
I'm a human, but I don't have thick skin. I'm working really hard to develop thicker skin. But, I take some pieces to heart. I feel like I try really hard to tune into what is good advice, what is very appropriate advice that I can move forward and grow with, and what advice often comes from maybe not such a nice place from people, and kind of compartmentalize those different things and recognize what is beneficial to move forward with and grow with, and what needs to be, kind of pushed away and gotten rid of. Not all the time is it easy. There's been tears. I'll tell you that. That's for darn sure. But overall, compartmentalization, I guess that's the best way I can say I deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, which probably isn't like the healthiest way to deal with things, but it's what I've done my whole life, so it works.
It's very human.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you've compartmentalized things. Things are just like pent up inside.
Yes.
Do you have any hobbies?
Yeah. Oh my God. Being outdoors, playing with animals. I love animals. Animals make my heart skip a beat. Spending time with my family. I'm probably just as close with my family as I am with my husband's family. And so Jake and I feel like we never have a single minute of downtime because we're always doing something, whether it's time with family, going and visiting animals, going outside and hiking, traveling, painting, doing art together, you name it. We have 8 billion, jillion, million hobbies that we always keep ourselves, occupied basically with.
Do you think that complements or contradicts your craft?
Oh, compliments.
Yeah.
150% compliments. Yeah. I think, half the time whenever I do floral artworks, it's usually because I've just recently gone on a walk and I saw a beautiful thistle in a bush and I was like, oh my God, that's the most beautiful plant I've ever seen. I have to take a picture of it and I have to paint it when I get home. Or I've gone to the arboretum, I'm like, oh my God, I've never seen a plant like this in my life. It's so beautiful. It needs to be put onto canvas. So yeah, everything complements my artwork.
And going a little further, would you recommend going to school or taking classes to build on the craft of painting?
So this is something that actually myself and some of my artist friends have talked about, and I think it depends on the individual that you are. So for example, one of my really dear friends, her name is Amber Vittoria, and she's a phenomenally accomplished artist, right? And her family has really supported her from the time that she was a child to really build out her artwork, her aesthetic, her craft. She's gone to school for it. And she's become, immensely successful. She's so talented. She creates the most beautiful artworks. And then there's, people like myself and a lot of my family members that have just kind of learned as we've gone on. And so I think it depends on who you are as an individual. I think probably one of the things that I've found, if I were to go back to school, I probably would have liked to go to a hybrid art and business and marketing program. And the reason that I say that is because I've come to find that nowadays, at least in my personal case, and this may not be the case for everybody, and that's totally fine, I think that the business and the marketing aspect is oftentimes almost as important as the art craft itself. And of course, there's plenty of artists that oftentimes hire external marketing, groups and so on because it's just not their shtick, and that's totally fine and understandable. I suck at math. Math is not my shtick. But I find marketing also fascinating. I find business fascinating. I find that it kind of titillizes the brain a little bit and gets me intrigued. And so if I were to say going back to school for just painting, depends on who you are. How much further do you want to expand your craft? But also nowadays there's so much free education available online. So not always is it necessary. I think most of us could probably get a master's level degree just from reading books on our own accord, watching videos, taking online classes, like online, whatever, educational tutorials ourselves. So there's a lot of different multitudes of ways that we can continue to learn without just going back to school.
So I got a question for somebody who went to school for something else.
Mm-hmm.
Would you recommend having a side career? Would you recommend going to school for something else, kind of as like a survival job, if you will? In the same vein, do you regret becoming an occupational therapist, or would you have rather have just gone to school and become an artist early on?
Again, I think that's a question for each individual. It's a very subjective question, I think. And the reason I say that is because, I think plenty of us artists at some point in our careers are going to have to go get a side hustle at a coffee shop. It may even be me going back to being PRN as an OT some point in my future. That's very possible. And there's no shame in that. Like, you're going to hit periods in your career where you're doing really, really, really well and things are super awesome. And then periods where you're like, man, like times are rough and I need income and I need to go get a side hustle. That's totally okay too. For me, if I could do a do-over, I probably would have gone to school for marketing or business or get my master's in business administration. and then done my artwork on the side. As much as I have enjoyed being an occupational therapist, and as much as I have enjoyed, especially there's different types of patients. I really love working with brain injury patients. I find that extremely fascinating. It's just not been my ultimate passion in life. And it's something that I think I could have probably changed the direction that I was in. I could have changed my trajectory and potentially kind of lifted off this art career faster when I was younger, had I gone in a different direction. Also, I think healthcare for me, it tends to be a very thankless career. And oftentimes you'll talk to a lot of healthcare professionals who say, yeah, we're overworked, we're underpaid, and now there's a burnout period of about 5 years for almost all of us, that after about 5 to 10 years, almost all of us are seeking out different careers because either our bodies can't take it anymore, our emotions can't take it anymore, you name it. And so I probably would not have gone to school for occupational therapy had I done it over again.
Would that be your advice for anybody trying to get started in painting?
To go into something other than...
Just to take marketing classes.
Oh, I think it depends on who you are. Like my girlfriend Amber, she never took marketing classes, but she's just naturally a brilliant human. Mm-hmm. And so she's figured out a lot of this stuff on her own, just following kind of her intuition and past careers that she's had where she's learned and grown. And so I think it depends on who you are as a human. Like if you feel like you are just super not gifted in marketing, it's something that you really struggle with, you want to take classes in it and learn more, yeah, absolutely do that. If you're somebody who you feel like it's kind of a natural gift of yours to recognize and understand how to market yourself, how to manage business, and you feel like you don't need that education, then don't go get that education. If you want to go get an education in something else, do that. Like whatever toots your horn, whatever you feel like you need more education in, you need a little bit more oomph for, go take time to learn that, That's I guess my 2 cents. I hope it's helpful. It may also not be helpful. I don't know.
Are there any misconceptions about your craft?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that art is an easy career. I think there's a lot of people that think that art is an easy career. And I think probably what they don't recognize is that oftentimes art is not an easy career. You have to be a go-getter. You have to be a hustler. You have to be the type of individual who's willing to work, 20-hour days to make it. Oftentimes it's going to require a lot of cold outreach to brands, to galleries, to people, you name it, and hearing the word no over and over and over and over and over again. And that's not easy. That oftentimes can take a massive toll on your psyche, on your confidence in yourself. And I feel like that's probably one of the greatest misconceptions is, oh, you're an artist, it's an easy life, you don't really have a true job. But I think that's untrue, personally. It can be a very difficult job, for sure, and it requires a lot of resilience and a lot of perseverance.
Mm-hmm. We have bills, too.
We gotta eat, too, listen.
And then, just off the top of your head, are there any funny or interesting stories or events that have happened with your craft?
Oh, God. Oh, gosh. Well, I have probably one of the funniest stories, I guess, which is semi-related to my craft. Are you familiar with David Dobrik? Okay, so he's a huge YouTuber, right? And I'm not much of a YouTube watcher at all. I kind of live under a rock, to be honest with you. My husband, however, is a huge YouTube watcher, so he knows David Dobrik through and through. And we went to a event that was in association with me as an artist a few years ago, and I continuously get David Dobrik mixed up with this other guy who creates these squirrel obstacle courses in his backyard. Have you seen that guy? And he videos them and they're really, awesome. I don't know why I get the two of them confused. So anyway, we're at this party and I see my husband sees David Dobrik and he goes, oh my God, Sarah, that's David Dobrik over there. I was like, well, you should go say hi. And he's like, no. I was like, well, then I'm going to go say hi. So I walk up to him and I go, David. And he's like, yeah. And he's like super, very, very nice guy. I go, I love your squirrel videos. And he kind of looks at me with this blank stare and he's like, my squirrel videos? I was like, yeah, the squirrel videos you do in your backyard. He goes, squirrel videos I do in my backyard. And I think that was immediately when I was like, shit, I've messed something up here.
He's trying to think, did I do something for a
Yeah. And my husband walks over and I was like, well, anyway, this is my husband, Jake. You guys have a great time. Hit it off. Enjoy. I'm going to go rock myself in a corner over there. Yeah, so that's like probably one of those moments that like replays in my head on a regular basis that like I got David Dobrik mixed up with some other human that does squirrel obstacle courses in his backyard and like deeply embarrassed myself very confidently as well. So that's probably one of the most hysterical stories, I think, in association with my career. In addition to, I met Rashida Jones from MSNBC. And again, I live under a rock and I don't recognize anybody ever. And I met her at the Brilliant Minds conference that I got to go speak with alongside Ashley Smith and Gary Vaynerchuk and Maha Bulinin. She brought us over there. And I was walking with Rashida Jones over to the conference and we were just chatting. We were talking about what I do and I go, yeah, what do you do? She told me what her career is and I felt so stupid and I go, you go, girl.
You go, girl.
And she kind of laughed and I was like, wow, I need to be put in a room and not let out ever again because I just insert foot and mouth on a regular basis. So yeah, I'm like a walking klutz basically.
She's probably like, oh, you probably heard of my dad or something.
Yeah. I'm like, I am so sorry. That is my fault.
Well, speaking of, you've met a lot of big names. You've traveled the world. What's next for the world of your craft?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest goals that I have presently is to get my heritage collection on display. As you know, this is a 5-piece collection that's a representation of the women of Iran, meant to jar a narrative about what's happening in Iran, the hopes for the future of Iran, and so on. And this collection is really meant to portray these various different attributes that these women of Iran have, whether it be bravery, whether it be strength, whether it be, kind of this sadness almost to them as well. And I want people to see that. I want people to see that through these artworks that I've put on canvas. And so I'd love someday to be able to display these pieces, whether they be displayed in a gallery or a museum or something of that sort, where I can let people know how proud I am of my heritage and that what you see of the Iranian people on the media is not truly what the Iranian people are about. I think if anybody were able to go visit Iran, they would find that Iranian people are oftentimes the most hospitable people. We will feed you until you pop. We want to make sure that you are comfortable and happy. We want you to enjoy your time with us. We want you to enjoy our culture, our beautiful architecture, our mosaics, our music, our dance, everything. There's so much more to the Iranian heritage than what is typically seen on the news. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, what upsets me so much is people thinking that we are bad people. We all ride camels to school, which is, very much not true at all. And so that's my next big goal that I'm trying to hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I personally have been to the Middle East and my mind was blown about my preconceived notions about it and then what actually was.
Yes.
I would very much love to visit Iran and just explore the culture.
Well, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, my friend, that someday you can safely go there and see the sights and eat the food and enjoy our access to the water and the mountains and the forests and all the beautiful things that we have there. So hope and pray someday that'll be an opportunity.
And what's next for the world of digital art? We talked a little bit about AI earlier. Mm-hmm. How is technology going to be incorporated more into art?
I mean, I think that it's kind of similar to the way that photography has been incorporated into art, right? Mm-hmm. So photography itself has become an art craft, right? But it's also become a tool for a lot of artists. Oftentimes we will photograph something out in the world and then we'll paint it or incorporate it into our artwork, what have you. And my assumption is that we continue to evolve with technology, whether it become its own art form or it becomes a tool for us to use as artists. I think we've seen more and more artists with 3D artworks that are absolutely incredible. We've seen artists that are using it as tools in their artwork. And so I think that as more and more technological advances come about, we're going to see that more and more often implemented into our craft. And so I think it's going to continue to diversify the various mediums that we have in art. At one point in time, it was pigments on a wall, right? Back in ancient times. Now we've evolved to pigments, we've evolved to oils, we've evolved to acrylics, gouache, watercolor, sculpture, ceramics, photography, digital renderings, all kinds of different things. And I think it's just going to continue to expand and expand from there. And people are going to fall in love with whatever mediums resonate with them. And I think it's going to be a positive thing, but I think we're also going to have a lot of people who dig their heels in that don't want to see those things change. They're worried it's going to take their jobs. They're worried it's going to, upset their current lifestyle and so on. But then there's going to be a lot of us that are recognizing it as a tool for efficiency and productivity and evolution and change and so on in our craft, and I think that's great as well.
Yeah, you yourself use the digital aspect in your work just for the patterns.
Yes,
and whatnot,
yeah.
And that would be extremely difficult to do without.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So you're a proponent of working with the technology.
Yes, I'm very much a proponent of staying ahead of the curve always being open-minded, always being willing to explore new things. I personally think that oftentimes if you don't evolve, you get left behind, and henceforth, this is why I entered Web3, this is why I've dabbled in AI, this is why I got into digital artwork and everything, is because I always enjoy being ahead of the curve and staying abreast of what is new and what's changing.
And we've talked about the Women in Weapons series, we've talked about the Heritage series. Is there anything new coming?
Yeah, well, I've started actually doing a very maximalist set of works. Right now they're all just digital, but I'm wanting to do them mixed media, which incorporates my patterns into both the background and a semblance of the foreground. So I actually just have a piece getting started, and it's going to be mixed media. So it's basically the multitude of the artwork, the backdrop that's all digitally rendered. My patterns are the background of a physical piece, and then I want to actually do the foreground, the skin, and the hair in either oil paints or acrylics. And so it's going to be mixed media, and it's going to just be something that I explore, and I want to kind of see how it goes. But that'll probably be the next set of artworks that I release.
Fantastic. I'm so excited to see those. And for all my peekers out there, please look into Sara Sparky Baumann's work. It is so unique and very colorful, and you just are taken aback by it. Where can we see your work?
Yeah, you can find my work on my website. It's www.sarabaumann.art. You can also find me on Instagram or Twitter, and it's at Sara S. Baumann. And I'd love to interact with you guys. If y'all have any questions or want to reach out, I'm very open and accessible, so holler at me.
Fantastic. I can't thank you enough for joining me and piquing my interest. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
I think the biggest thing that I have to say to people is be kind to one another. Let's create a ripple effect of kindness and slowly but surely, hopefully, leave the world in a better place than we entered it.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I do like to end with one last question. If you could excel at any other craft besides your own, what would you want to do?
Be an archaeologist.
Archaeologist.
Ancient history is my jam. Egyptology, Roman history, Greek history, all of it. I'm so unbelievably fascinated by history. So archaeology, for sure. I've seen some volunteer archaeological digs. You can actually go volunteer at archaeological digs. So someday that is on the bucket list.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And it probably goes hand in hand with traveling, too.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Probably get inspired to do some more art.
Very much so. And my fascination with cultures. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Sparky. Which, by the way, I found out it's not because of her snappy go-get-'em attitude. It's just because of her maiden name.
Yes.
Sparks.
Yes. Formerly Sarah Sparks, called Sparky because we had too many Sarahs in the hospital that I worked at.
But thank you, Sparky.
Thanks,
and
Scoob.
Thank you to all my peekers out there. Please let me know if you know of any special or unique artists or art forms you think I should explore. I'm currently in Dallas, Texas, and cannot wait to see where Pique My Interest takes me next. Remember, creativity comes from the heart. Push yourselves. Be kind to each other. I'm Scoob Decker, and thank you for helping me pique my interest.
Thank you.